Good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch, broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion House, New Mexico, working in oil painting alchemical light. Alright, what I did last time was work these scales in. Now what I'm going to do here is turn these scale patternings here into the trees kind of scattered across this hill. And that will be used with done with a phthalo green, a pure phthalo green. And then I'm going to take this patterning down here with some ultramarine and some white and develop a water pattern up through here that somewhat resembles the scale pattern down here, and also cuts a blue aura-ish area around this arm and elbow. So, okay, here we go.
Are memories stored in brains, and so on. And then, treating them as testable scientific hypotheses, the questions open up, and then new kinds of research become possible, new ways of looking at nature. And perhaps I should start with the laws of nature fixed, since this is one of my own starting points. The usual assumption is that the laws of nature are fixed. At the moment of the Big Bang, all the laws and all the constants of nature were completely fixed the way they are now, like a kind of cosmic Napoleonic code. Now, this is the sort of standard assumption. Now, it's a very bizarre assumption because in the 17th century people had a reason for it. They thought that God fixed the laws of nature and God was eternal, so the laws of nature were eternal. They were like eternal Pythagorean or Platonic ideas in the mind of God. That made sense coherently, philosophically. In the 19th century, the materialists who were gaining ground in the 19th century said, well, we don't need God, because let's just say the whole universe is eternal, with eternal matter, eternal energy, and eternal laws, and you don't need a God to start it all off, a creator. So the universe became eternal. So eternal laws made sense in an eternal universe. And most physicists thought the universe was eternal, with eternal laws, until 1966. When the Big Bang theory became the predominant cosmology, which then said the universe began very small and very hot, less than the size of the head of a pin, 14 billion years ago, and it's been growing and cooling down and expanding ever since. We have a radically evolutionary universe. That's new. It wasn't part of classical physics or anything. So then, the idea that all the laws of nature are fixed at the Big Bang has carried over as a kind of inertia from the previous worldview. So most scientists say, well, at the moment of the Big Bang, all the laws must have been fixed, because the laws of nature are fixed. So, as my friend Terence McKenna used to say, modern science is based on the principle, give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. And the one free miracle is the appearance of all the matter and energy in the universe and all the laws of nature and the constants of nature from nothing in a single instant at the moment of the Big Bang. So then, the big debate within modern cosmology is the laws of nature and the constants seem to be just right for life to evolve on Earth. They could have been completely different. So some people take a kind of old-fashioned deistic view. Well, that means there must be a God outside nature who fine-tunes the laws and constants and before pressing the start button for the Big Bang. But the more popular view among cosmologists, many of whom are atheists, is, well, actually there's nothing special about this universe except the fact we're in it. There's actually billions of universes, trillions, quadrillions of actual universes, all with different laws and constants. We just happen to be in the one that's right for us. It's the only one we know about. So I challenged I'm quite friendly with Martin Rees, who's Astronomer Royal. He was president of the Royal Society, Master of Trinity College, Cambridge, the very heart of the scientific establishment. So I said, well, why on earth do you want to have billions of universes? Isn't this the ultimate violation of Occam's razor, the principle you shouldn't multiply entities unnecessarily? I said, you're multiplying universes to quadrillions of them. He said, yes, but this way we get rid of God. But the trouble is they haven't got rid of God because, as theologians have pointed out, an infinite God could be the God of an infinite number of universes. They've simply proliferated universes. But you see, there's another way of thinking about it, which is what I'm coming to, which is the idea that my scientific hypothesis of morphic resonance, which is the hypothesis there's a memory in nature, that The so-called laws of nature are not fixed laws that were fixed at the moment of the Big Bang. They're habits that have evolved. Nature certainly has regularities, but there's a kind of memory within nature that shapes what happens. Each species has a kind of collective memory on which each individual draws and to which it contributes. And this is a bit like what Jung called the collective unconscious, except I'm saying it's not just humans, it's everywhere, everything in nature. Even crystals, a particular kind of crystal has a kind of collective memory of how to form. And this theory makes a lot of testable predictions. If you make a new crystal of a new compound for the first time, it may take a long time to form. But if you keep making it, a habit will build up in nature. Morphic resonance transfers the habit across time based on similarity. And it will get easier and easier to crystallize. And so it does. It is known that things get easier to crystallize, and chemists just say, oh, well, it's just us getting better at doing it. But the fact is, it's not disputed that things do get easier to crystallize. If you train rats to learn a new trick in Harvard, then rats in Britain and in Australia should learn the same trick quicker just because they've learned it in Harvard. And that's actually been tested, and that's what happens. If a lot of people do a 5-letter word puzzle called Wordle, it's a new one every day, published by the New York Times, then during the course of the day it should get easier for people to solve that word puzzle, because so many people have solved it. It's already known that it seems to get easier for people to do the Times crossword as the day goes on, and many aficionados say they much more easily do it if they do it the next day when the day is published. So many people have already done it. IQ tests, average scores have gone up by at least 30% all over the world, not because people are 30% more intelligent, but because the tests seem to be getting easier to do, standardized tests. So this is a testable hypothesis, morphic resonance, memory in nature, and it gives us a completely different view of the regularities of nature. We see them as evolutionary, evolving within nature. There's no need to postulate either a deistic God outside nature or trillions of unobserved universes without a shred of evidence. We can have a view of nature and of memory that's very different. And just finally, to summarize this idea, morphic resonance depends on similarity, and similarity between what's happening now and what happened in the past. So if you ask the question, who in the past was most similar to me? The answer is me. I'm more similar to me in the past than I am to you. And that means the most specific resonance acting on me from the past was from my own past. Self-resonance helps to maintain the form of organisms, and I think underlies their memories by morphic resonance. Well, one of the dogmas of science that most people in neuroscience would never challenge or even see as a dogma or even an assumption, as you were saying, is the idea that memories are stored in the brain. It's just taken for granted. In a materialist world, everything's material, memories must be material, they must be stored somewhere in the brain. People have spent 100 years and billions of dollars trying to find memories stored in brains without success. But have they given up? No, they just say we need more money and more time, because then we'll finally track them down. And I think there's a very simple reason they haven't found them. I don't think they're there. I think it's a bit like looking for traces in your TV set of programs you watched last night. It's not how TV works. It resonates with transmitters across space. I'm suggesting memories work through resonance across time. It's not stored inside the brain at all. The brain's more like a TV receiver than a video recorder. Now, if you damage the brain, you can have loss of memory. If I damage your TV set, I could cause it to lose sound. I could make it aphasic, so there's no sounds coming out of it. That wouldn't prove all the sounds are generated inside the TV set, only that that's important for their reception and processing. And in a similar way, I think our memories are not stored in our brains. Whereas the materialists, you see, coming back to the materialist model, memories are stored in the brain decays at death, therefore all memories are wiped out at death. No survival of death. All these religions say there's transmigration, reincarnation, heaven, hell, purgatory, all just childish nonsense. because we now know that memories are stored in the brain and they're wiped out at death. But they don't now know that, they just think they know it. And so that's just one example of where if you have one of the 10 dogmas is that memories are stored in the brain, another dogma is the laws of nature are fixed. Whereas morphic resonance provides a testable scientific hypothesis that provides a completely different view that's much more compatible with an evolutionary view of nature.
I mean, the example of it that struck me from reading you is the example of Dutch blue tits. I think it's Dutch blue tits, at least blue tits. And I thought it would be nice to hear about blue tits.
Oh,
obviously, you've all been thinking that question, haven't you?
Yes.
Oh, you really talk about blue tits now?
Well, the thing is that blue tits, some of you may be too young to remember when milk bottles were delivered to doorsteps. Well, luckily in Hampstead where I live we still have this, so every morning I have milk bottles delivered to my doorstep, semi-skimmed organic milk, in a nice bottle that I rinse and return, and milkmen arriving with milk. It used to be everywhere. Now it's a kind of niche thing, confined to parts of Hampstead, I suppose.
That's agreed, I can do
Anyway, the thing is that around the 1920s, the milk bottles had, in those days, cardboard tops on them. People in Southampton noticed that when they went to get their milk in the morning, the top bit was missing, the cream at the top of the bottle. It was before semi-skimmed milk had been invented. The cream was missing, and the top was sort of bits of the cardboard top were lying in shreds. So keen-eyed observers soon found that blue tits had discovered how to open these bottle tops by pecking, pulling off the cardboard top, and then drinking cream. And in fact, a few of them just paid the price, and there were people who sometimes found drowned blue tits head first inside their milk bottles. But mostly they got away with it. And so this then turned up somewhere else in England, and some Cambridge scientists were, through the British Ornithological Society and various bird watching groups, got people all over the country to monitor the spread of this. And it turned out it started popping up all over Britain. And when it popped up more than about 50 miles from where it had been seen before, they took it to be an independent discovery, because blue tits don't move much, they're home-loving birds. And so it was, and the rate of discovery increased, until by the time the Second World War began in 1939, blue tits all over Britain were doing it. Moreover, blue tits in Holland were doing it, and blue tits on the continent, where they also had milk bottle deliveries. Then milk deliveries stopped during the war, and after the war, when they resumed again, blue tits only lived 3 or 4 years, so it wasn't as if there were lots of old timers who said, oh, the days of free cream are back again. It popped up all over Britain, and moreover in Holland, where there was an even longer break. It didn't resume milk deliveries until 1948. They had serious famines in Holland after the German occupation. It popped up again in Holland almost immediately, everywhere. And when I first moved to Hampstead, it happened to us all the time. But then we switched to semi-skimmed milk on health reasons, and blue tits stopped doing it. It wasn't worth their while. So these habits more or less died out now, owing to the spread of semi-skimmed milk. But the thing is that morphic resonance, you see, would help to explain this evolutionary spread, accelerating spread, and not just through imitation, but through it just getting easier to do, easier to learn. And I think that in evolutionary terms, a lot of behaviour spreads within societies through morphic resonance. And I'm actually, on Monday, I have a talk with a science lab in Lancashire where I'm planning an experiment looking at antibiotic resistance in bacteria, because it's been found that in bacteria, new kinds of resistance pop up. And when they occur in one place, but then they pop up all over the world. And in a way that some epidemiologists who studied this think it can't just be explained by people travelling on planes and carrying these germs around with them. There's something more mysterious going on. I think it's morphic resonance. We're doing experiments designed to see whether morphic resonance is playing a part in the spread of antibiotic resistance, which I think it probably is. But this would have big implications for evolution and understanding what's going on in evolution and for the spread of behaviour. And so this would give a new way of doing science. This isn't anti-science, which is my opponents say I'm anti-science because I'm going against the dogmas of science. But actually, I think it's more scientific to question these things and to look at science in a new way. I think whole new areas of science would open up in the most exciting way if we go beyond this straitjacket of these dogmas.
I mean, one of the things that is noticeable in your work is that you believe that science should come from what you observe. It should start with your observation, not start with theory. That it should be science. It should be testing things. You know, one of the things you've done a lot in your life is test the sort of things that lots of people say. You know, that you've done studies about dogs knowing their owners are coming home. There's a particular dog in your book that's very striking. We might hear about. You know, everybody that I grew up with always said that the dog knew when you were coming home. And your vision of science is, okay, well, we should be able to test that then.
Yes, well, I start from natural history. I think science should start from natural history.
In the sense of
what's actually happening. When you look at the world, you know, what's actually going on. For example, this thing I talked about in today's Daily Mail, a lot of people wrote into me saying that they found they could wake their dog or cat by staring at it. So I put out an article online and said, you know, have you ever noticed this? And lots more stories poured in. That, if you just take one story, it's an anecdote. But I'm of the view that the plural of anecdote is data. And if thousands of people all over the world say they've seen the same kind of thing, then something seems to be happening, and it's worth investigating.
It still could be wrong.
It could still be wrong. But what happened was that I started having lots of people telling me their dog or cat knew when they were coming home, go and wait at a door or a window, and people would, at home would know when the absent person was coming, even if it was not a routine time, from the dog's behaviour. I've over 1,000 of these stories, and about 500 about cats.
There's a remarkable one about a cat that with a naval, I think it was a naval officer or something, who didn't want to tell his mother when he was coming home.
That's right. That was a neighbour of mine in my hometown, York-on-Trent, in Nottinghamshire. I got interested in this when I was working and writing in New York. The editor of the local newspaper, the New York Advertiser, was at school with me. And I talked to him about this, and he said, oh yeah, that happens with my dog. You know, he said, in fact, it's embarrassing. He said, the dog knows when I leave the office to come home. He said, but sometimes, he said, I meet someone on the way and we go and have a drink. And when I get home, my wife says to me, Roger, where have you been? You left the office 2 hours ago. and then my neighbour had a son who was a merchant seaman, and he was very attached to the cat. And she said she always knew when he was coming. He wouldn't tell her because he didn't want her to worry if the boat was delayed or if he missed the train or anything. He'd never tell her when he was coming home. But the cat would get very excited, would go to his room, and she'd know the signs. And so she'd get his favourite food. When he arrived home, she almost got his dinner ready. She knew what he was coming. She got his food ready for him. When I said to her, that's remarkable, how amazing, she said, oh, the cat just knows. I mean, she didn't think about it, she just took it for granted this is happening. And I found more and more people did that. And then I talked to some of my sceptical friends, and they said, oh yes, it's just a routine, or they're hearing subtle sounds of car engines, familiar car engines from miles away and stuff. So they said they didn't deny the phenomenon.
Oh, we got 8 minutes. Might be enough time to glob on some things.
They just explained it away. And so I then thought, well, okay, what's the scientific approach? It's not to sort of argue with people, oh yes they do, oh no they don't. Do the experiments. So we found people with dogs that do it, set up cameras, had them go at least 5 miles away, then come home at randomly chosen times they didn't know in advance, in unfamiliar vehicles, so there's no familiar car sounds, there's no routine. The people at home didn't know when they were coming. And we told them when to come through telephone pager just gave a signal at a randomised time. And then on the film, we filmed the dog the whole time they were out. And on the film, you see about 10, 15, 20 minutes before they come home, the dog goes and starts waiting at the window. And it started waiting at the window when the person set off to come, and they said goodbye to their friends and sort of went out, or when they called for the taxi. It wasn't anything to do with actually sort of slamming of car doors 5 miles away or anything. And did this over and over and over again, and with other dogs as well. This is on film. On my website, if you go to the experiments video section, you can see a video of one of these experiments. So this is a testable phenomenon that has never been done before, and it hasn't been done since in any university, because it looks as if it's telepathic. The dog's picking up the person's intention. But telepathy is completely taboo within the academic world. And the reason it's taboo is because, according to materialism, your mind's nothing but the activity of your brain. Therefore, your thoughts about going home couldn't possibly influence a dog 5 miles away. It's simply impossible. Therefore, anyone who says it's happening, like me, is a pseudo-scientist, because they've either been duped or they've just done such sloppy experiments they failed to see the flaws in the experiments, or they've been taken in by people who wishfully think their dogs have powers they don't really have and couldn't really have. And I was treated with incredibly corrosive attacks from skeptics for being a complete fraud. Just instead of saying it isn't this interesting, let's try it ourselves. One skeptic did try it himself and he got the same results. But then he said that the dog had failed the test because before the person came home, it had gone to the window. It went to the window a few times to look at passing cats and things. And when I showed the dog was actually at the window about 3% of the time on his films, before the owner came home, about 75% of the time when the owner was coming home, he said, well, because it already failed the test by a strict criterion he'd invented, all this other data was irrelevant. And he then got headlines in newspapers saying he'd been refuted. He was one of the newspapers very pleased when they had thought of the headline, "Psychic dog fails to give scientist a lead." Anyway, this research can go on in people's homes around the land, and most people who just ordinary dog or cat owners are much more curious and cooperative than people in universities, because it's not because they're not interested. In fact, lots of scientists have told me their dogs know when they're coming home from the lab. But if you do this in a university, you just wouldn't get funding, you'd be attacked by people who's doing pseudoscience. It's terrible. And the reason for it is this dogmatic belief in the materialist worldview, which is truly inhibiting curious science.
All right, so
I know I'm talking
that starts transforming the scales into trees and gives a interesting sort of rhyming pattern on the bottom portion done with deep blues. And I'll probably work these whites into a similar pattern out into the reds and sort of waterify that entire area. But that's probably it for the moment. Sunday, Adelon's been out playing. I was up kind of late last night working, so I think I might just call it for the day. But that's the end of this session, so thanks for watching. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting, alchemical light. Have a good day.